you're tuned back in here to SMC Sports right here on 90.3 WMSC in Upper Montclair, New Jersey. Got a little NHL theme music to lighten the mood a little bit. Sean McChesney, Nick Flaherty, co-hosts of Stckin Sports, in the studio with me. And now on the phone we have Orlando news reporter, and he's a former Tampa Bay Lightning in-game reporter, Jeff McAdam. Jeff, you're on SMC Sports. What's going on, Jeff?
Sean, hey, how you doing? Doing great. Just taking a little break out from doing news to talk about my other passion, getting back into hockey, and what better time to do it than the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yeah.
Can't argue there.
Absolutely, Jeff. And from your experience with the Tampa Bay Lightning, you're talking to two very heartbroken Ranger fans here, so we'll try our best to be professional.
Hey, you guys had your year. That was last year.
Yeah.
This is our year. We'll go, as long as we go back and forth for the next few years, I won't argue with that.
Sounds good to me, as long as we can get something next year. So, Jeff, just going off your experience with the Tampa Bay Lightning, you know, what was it like covering the team, and what can you expect from the finals this season?
You know, it's an interesting question because this team has been, it's hard to really put your finger on. And there's been teams in the past that I've covered, and I even grew up in Denver and felt like I really had an idea about a team, especially maybe midway through the season. But certainly when you come to a trade deadline, you feel good about your team. You have an idea how far they can go in the playoffs. This year has just been so unpredictable. It's hard to really been able to judge it, and it's not because they have injuries, and it's not because of any unforeseen circumstance. It's just been interesting because it's developed literally every single day. If you would have told me before this playoff started that Tyler Johnson would be leading the team in goal scoring in the playoffs, and the triplet line of Palat and Kucherov and Johnson would be doing as well as they would, I wouldn't have believed it. It's been a development throughout the playoffs, and certainly it's come at the right time, guys.
Well, Jeff, you mentioned this team has been up and down at times. I mean, they had a brilliant regular season, but it's really interesting having watched them in this postseason. They had the opening round series against Detroit where they were extremely up and down. They struggled in the first game at home. They had a very up and down stretch. Their game 5 they lost as well. And we had talked about it before. The Rangers have that never say die attitude. It really seems that it also carries over down there in Tampa as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it kind of gets back to not being able to really know what to expect. The Lightning has by far the best home record in the entire NHL. I think they had 32 regular season home wins. The next best team had 28. So that's a pretty big margin of difference. But when you get into the playoffs, they've been not very successful at all at home. And so it kind of gets back to what do you expect? I was at Game 5 against Detroit, and they got blown out at home. It was 2-2. Big-time game. That's one of those moments where you figure if you're going to advance in the playoff series, you got to win this game. They got straight up blown out in Game 5 at home, and you figured that was it. That was going to be the end. Then they go to Detroit. They pull off a Game 6 win in Detroit and come back. Now, the same thing happened. I was at Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. You guys know it all too well. There were a couple Rangers fans sitting right in front of me. Like, that's a game you got to win. You're on home ice, especially when you have such a dominant home ice record during the regular season. They let New York come in, steal Game 6, and you figure, that's it, it's over. They can't possibly, if they can't take care of it on home ice, how are they going to go back to New York and win it there? And yet they do it again. I think their road record has been really a surprise this season, and certainly on the flip side of that, their home record in the playoffs has been somewhat of a disappointment.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And, looking at this Tampa Bay team who I wouldn't say did bad on their home ice, but they didn't do as well as they wanted to. But now on the opposite side, on the opposition on the road in the Garden, they only gave up only a few amount of goals, and the last goal they gave up was Game 2.
4 games.
Was Game 2. So I feel like if Tampa could take that momentum, especially when they have to go to Anaheim for Games 3 and 4, this series could take a wide turn real quick.
You know what? And that's the thing. It's just
Chicago. I didn't mean to say Anaheim.
No, it's okay. You know what? I even picked Anaheim before this whole thing started to go to the finals. They didn't look that good, by the way. So I don't blame you for saying Anaheim. I had already put it as more of a guarantee kind of in my head that they would be there playing whoever came out of the East. But yeah, you guys saw that Rangers series. What? 2 games they give up 1 goal. Then the next 2 games they give up 6 goals. It was just like it was night and day. And it's so flip floppy, right? It's
just the most bipolar series.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Nick.
That's exactly right, and that's I guess what kind of makes this whole thing so exciting is that like I said, there were when I grew up covering other teams, you could tell what was going to happen. You had a feeling. I grew up an Avalanche fan. I'll say it only here on the radio. I grew up an Avalanche fan, and before that 2001 season, I bought a VHS tape for. I'm dating myself here. A VHS tape for every single playoff game because I said, you know what, they're going to win the Cup this year. I just know it. They're that good. This Lightning team, it's not because I don't believe in them, but it's just like you never know what you're going to get. And it's been an unbelievably pleasant surprise so far this season, and obviously they're going to hope to ride it as far as they possibly can.
Seems to carry over almost to the goaltender, as you said. I mean, Ben Bishop has been fantastic in some games. He was, strong in Game 5 in particular at Madison Square Garden. The Rangers, not to take anything away from Bishop, but the Rangers lacked a lot of creativity in Game 7. But
Game 5 as well.
He was fantastic in Game 5. He was very good in Game 2. And even in a losing effort in Game 1, he was strong. And that was the same thing.
Lights out in 7.
Exactly. I mean, early on, round 1, he had some up and downs against Detroit. I mean, and I'm impressed by his mental toughness, really. I remember he had a horrible mistake. He put the puck in his own net in, I believe, Game 4 in Detroit, going down 3-1 in that series. And he was able to recover, keep the Lightning in the game. The resiliency is really impressive to watch.
It is. It's hard to know exactly what to expect. All you got to really get is, I guess, 4 really good games out of 7 to give your team a chance. And so he's had a couple off nights, but you're right. He's found a way to bounce back, and even Game 6 against the Rangers, essentially getting shuffled off the ice midway through the second period, and you're like, uh-oh, you got to go back to New York, and you got to bring him back in net. How's he going to react to that? Well, we see what he did in Game 7, and obviously was very impressive. And I think a lot of that goes back to last year. You play a great season, you're ready for the playoffs. You get injured a few weeks before the playoffs begin, and boom, there goes your playoff year. And I think the off season, I don't know. I don't have personal conversations with Ben, but I would have to imagine when you have a year like you did last year, so successful, to get injured, to come up short, to play an entire season. It's not baseball with 162 games, but it's not football where you only play 16. It's 82 games. It's a long, grueling season. And to get so close last year, to only not be able to play in it, I think is helping fuel this fire for him this year. And obviously, results so far, guys, been great.
Absolutely, Jeff. And I understand that you're busy, so one last question before we let you go. Ben Bishop has been lights out in the regular season against Chicago, a .970 save percentage against Chicago in the regular season. The last time Tampa faced Chicago on their home ice, they beat them 4-0. But obviously, as we've seen in the Stanley Cup playoffs, stats in the regular season do not even matter. They're totally irrelevant. But looking at the Chicago team with the guys like with Patrick Kane and Corey Crawford being an absolute block on that net, what do you think this Tampa Bay team is going to have to do? What are they going to have to pull out of their game plans to defeat this Chicago team who has very recent experience in the Stanley Cup Finals and very recent success in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
The Stanley Cup Finals, completely different deal. You guys know when you go into the playoffs, the first 3 rounds, you're facing teams you faced all season long. Maybe some more than others, but you certainly have an idea of what they'll throw at you. When you get to the Stanley Cup Finals, it's a different kind of game. You only see these teams a couple times a year, and it's going to be a lot of adjustment on the fly. I think if the Lightning can even split these 2 games at home, I'm happy with that. I've seen the way they've played on the road, and they can certainly go on the road and take it. It's like any, it's going to sound like cliche almost, but the first game, I think the first 2 games really, is going to be a little bit of a feeling out match to see, what are you going to throw at, what can you counter, and I don't know if that even stops. That the cliche is you take a game or 2 and you feel out a series, but as we saw with the Rangers last series, I felt like Game 6, the Rangers were even switching stuff up on the Lightning that they didn't quite know how to handle. And so it's going to be one of those continual chess matches all the way through. As we always talk about, defense seems to always win games. The Lightning have always said it, if we can keep our structure, and they're referring to their defense, if we can keep our structure, we have success. They said they didn't do it in Game 6 against the Rangers. They came back and did it in Game 7. It's a tight-knit structure down low. It's a very specific formation. They feel like if they can stick to it, not get out of their game plan, they have a shot. And as much as they score goals, they were the number 1 offensive team in the NHL this year. As much as they score goals, the feeling you get around this team is to win this, we're going to have to play unbelievable defense, and we're going to have great goaltending. So it's interesting. It's a completely different tactic than what they've had all season long.
Absolutely, Jeff, and it's definitely going to be a great series as well. I really appreciate you calling in and giving us insight. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet. All right, we'll call back when we celebrate the cup.
All right, we'll see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. That was Jeff McAdam, news reporter from Orlando, Florida, and former Tampa Bay Lightning reporter with Bay News 9 in Tampa Bay. We're going to take a quick break here on SMC Sports. Come back. Me and Nick will wrap up the last 45 minutes with preview of the Stanley Cup Finals. You're listening to SMC Sports. Back after this.